And welcome back to the 20 Strongest Captain Class Shinigami video series. We're on Captain 6. Oh, the Bubble Boy entry, as to use poker terminology. For those of you who don't know, the Bubble Boy in poker is when you're making it to the final table, usually the top 8. It's that person who gets knocked out in 9th place right before they make it to the final table. This is basically our Bubble Boy. The 6th spot is the Bubble Boy before we get into the top 5, which is like, the 5 strongest Captain Class Shinigami, in my opinion. And wouldn't you know, goes to one of my lesser favorite captains, Byakuya Kuchiki. Now keep in mind though, Byakuya is still ranked number 6, which means he beat, at minimum, the other 14 on the list. And remember, someone can place lower on the list but beat someone higher on the list because when you're talking about their abilities particularly versus the other person's abilities, they just happen to be a better matchup against that person. But in the long haul, overall, that person's still ranked lower or that person's still ranked higher because they beat more opponents outright. For instance, Shunsui, even though he's Captain Commander, I don't actually think he's the strongest captain. He's just the overall most powerful, oldest, most experienced, and wisest captain. That's why I think he got the job. So either way, that's what we're going with that. With that being said, number 6, Byakuya Kuchiki. Byakuya has been a fan favorite for a lot of people for years. I myself have never really been a big fan of him. I don't hate any character per se in this series. That's not entirely true. There might be one or two characters who I really didn't like, but I'd have to really think on those characters. But I'm sure there was a couple who I really didn't like. Byakuya, among the captains, he is among my least favorite, and I think it's because they really did a good job of making him unlikable in the Soul Society arc. And even though he's clearly a good guy, he's clearly on the side of good, he's clearly a hero ultimately, they don't really do much for like a redeeming quality to him. It's kind of like Soifone. Soifone's personality, we get the fact that she felt heartbroken that Yoruichi left her. So that gave her some redemptive qualities, certainly, to offset the clearly stick up her ass personality she has, clearly arrogant personality she has. And prideful personality she has. But once you get back into like the fake Karakura Town arc, or Karakura Town arc, or you get into the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, nothing about her personality's changed at all. So it just makes her unlikable. And I feel that's kind of the same way with Byakuya. Although Byakuya is to a much lesser extent than someone like Soifone, because Byakuya clearly has had growth moments, particularly when it comes to his relationship with Rukia. In terms of how strong he is, though, it's a little spoiler for the Can't Fear Your Own World novel, Volume 2. Shunsui even says that if he got fired, Byakuya would most likely be the one to take up the position of head captain. Not necessarily because he's the strongest, but because in terms of his overall abilities, his overall demeanor, and his overall way of viewing his overall way of, handling things, and possibly because of his aristocratic status, too. He would be probably the best candidate. Though, to be fair, if Orohara decided to come back to the 13 Court Guard squad, I'm certain he would probably have been a good candidate, too. Either way, so Byakuya is basically would be a head captain candidate had Shunsui not been around, if Shunsui died or been fired, which goes to show just how powerful he probably is considered to be. In terms of how strong he is, though, we know for a fact that he's a master of Shunpo, being at minimum on par with someone like Yoruichi and Soifone. Probably not as fast, but close enough to it that they would be considered equals to some degree. The one thing I've seen listed on the wiki pages and stuff like that is that he is good at hand-to-hand. He is. I don't think we've ever seen him in a hand-to-hand fight. I think we've seen a couple individuals, in hand-to-hand fights. We've seen Kenpachi. We've seen Soifone, obviously. We've seen Komamura in a hand-to-hand fight. We've seen Ikaku get into physical brawls. So we've seen plenty of... Hell, we've seen Rukia get into physical brawls. I've never seen Byakuya get into physical brawl, so I have no idea where the idea that he's good in physical combat like that comes from. Maybe it's because he's just well-rounded is the idea that he is versed in it. And he probably is, but without any actual evidence, I can't really give that to him. At least not on a sort of masterful level like a Soifone or sheer power level like a Sajin or a Kenpachi. He's probably competent, but it's probably not his most valuable skill. He is a master swordsman, though. We do know that for fact, because we've seen him fight sword to sword multiple times, and he is a master class swordsman. And he is a master of Kido. We don't know if he can do like the level 99s or even the level 90s, but we know he can do level 80s without any problem. So it's very possible to assume he could do level 90s. He's probably not as easily versed in it though as someone like a Kisuke or a Hara or an Aizen, but he's probably right in that master level class. Like he is probably a Shunsui level combatant in terms of Kido. And we know Shunsui is a master using Kido. So yeah, I mean Kido, among the types of things we see him use, Kido is one of the many the big things we see him use. Surprisingly. And then obviously his Zanpakuto, Zenbon Zakura and Bankai Zenbon Zakura Kageyoshi. His Shikai, initially it turned the blade into 1,000 cherry blossom blades. Blades that looked like cherry blossoms, but they were in fact blades. Apparently, come the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, his Shikai apparently resembled his Bankai in how much of the blades it was actually creating, which means it's now probably creating a minimum tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of blades, if not maybe millions. It probably isn't quite the same level as his Bankai, but it is probably like comparable now to what his Bankai originally was. And his Bankai at this point is instead of like 1 million blades, it's probably like tens of millions of blades now. And he can manipulate them freely. They can do many different things, including defensive capabilities. Not only can they be defensive, they can be defensive from a distance while still being offensive. They can attack and defend simultaneously, encompass an entire area, create a giant dome to crush individuals, compress into thousands of hardened blades in Senkei, do an omnidirectional attack with Senkei, and then I don't even remember the White Emperor Phoenix one, or White Emperor attack. I don't remember quite the Japanese name for that, but basically compressing all of it down to like one final slash. Like it is a powerful Zanpakuto, no doubt about it. There are just far better Zanpakuto. It was never one of my favorites. I get it. I like the symbolism, like the whole aristocratal beauty of the cherry blossom, the elegance of his nobility. I enjoy that. But at the same time, it was never one of my favorites. So that being said, how did he fare? Well, he did a lot. He does not really win against Yamamoto or Ichibei. No, he doesn't win against Yuwak either. Or Ichibei. Yamamoto, the flames really just counteract the blades, the cherry blossoms. Kido-wise, they're both easily on the same level as each other. Yamamoto's probably even higher, just because he's older. He's had all the time in the world to use it. Hell, he used a level 92 Kido, Ikutozo, the giant flame katana, without incantation, and still was able to mildly injured, a Hogyoku-infused Aizen. And speed-wise, they're probably comparable to each other. See, the thing is, Yamamoto, for all of his roundabout overall power, isn't the master of everything. Like, Soifone might arguably be faster than him, because she's depicted as being one of the fastest, if not the fastest captain in the 13th Court Guard squad. But still, Yamamoto's probably at minimum comparable to individuals like them. Sword to sword, they're also easily comparable. Zanpakuto to Zanpakuto, which is really what this would probably come down to. Because honestly, he's physically stronger than Byakuya. We know because he's jacked. So it come down to Zanpakuto, and unfortunately, Zenbon Zakura cannot really compare to Ryujin Jika in terms of pure power or anything like that. And if it comes down to Bankai, it doesn't matter how many blades he has to overwhelm his opponents. They're going to incinerate going right up against Yamamoto. Ichibei is a bit trickier because Ichibei is just so unique as a character. He's fast enough to probably he might be even faster than any of the captains, because we know that the Demon of the Hot Springs, I can't remember his actual name. that guy could take Soifun by surprise. We know that for a fact because he did. And Ichibei is the leader of the Zero Division, meaning he's probably the strongest member and probably even faster than him. So he's probably faster than Byakuya. Kido to Kido, and there's probably no Kido that Ichibei doesn't know. He knows he's the monk that calls the true name. He knows the name of everything. He named Kido Kido. He knows the name of every Kido. He probably knows every Kido. So Kido to Kido, he's just way more experienced than Byakuya. Sword to sword. Now here's the thing. Sword to sword, Byakuya being able to use Zenbone Zakura does give him a little advantage against Ichimonji because he doesn't actually have to physically go toe-to-toe with the blade if he doesn't have to. Problem is, whatever his blade strikes gets its name cut in half. And then if you get hit by the ink, you lose your name. It's a dangerous ability, which means even if Zenbone Zakura's blades block Ichimonji, they will lose half their power because they will lose half the name. And it's still Zenbone Zakura, it's still the blade. So Zenbone Zakura probably becomes Zenbone, or it becomes Zakura. So it still loses half of its power. So it's a very dangerous blade to be going up against. Extremely dangerous. Ichibei and Ichimonji are two of the most dangerous things in the Bleach universe. So yeah, unfortunately Byakuya does not fare well against either of them. However, now we get into a long run of characters we can pretty much beat without too much difficulty. Soifun. Obviously, I've addressed all of these already, but we just need to address them again real quick. Soifun. Comparable in speed, better in swordsmanship, could easily keep himself from probably getting hit by the two-step kill. Her Shunko would probably pose a bit of a problem, but he counters that by just being more well-versed in Kido. We know she knows Kido. She actually knows at minimum level 30 Kidos without any difficulty. But we just never see the full extent of her Kido knowledge. Though Shunko does imply that she probably has a solid knowledge of Kido. So ultimately, if it comes down to her final move to kill him with Bankai, he can easily just stop that with a Kido or blow it up with a Kido because he's that well versed in it. Or he can just blow it up with his own Bankai. Zenbone Zakura Kageyoshi gets so much distance, just shreds the missile apart. Or he just blocks it with enough of them because he has enough blades to block it. So yeah, he beats both of them. Against Gin and Rose, he beats both of them pretty handily too. Gin got a hit in on him in the Soul Society arc, but that's because he was defending Rukia. Otherwise, I really don't see him naturally beating Byakuya. Byakuya is easily faster than him, or at least as fast as him. His swordsmanship skill as well is pretty much on par with Gin, though Gin is pretty much considered a prodigy in his own right. Kido-wise, we know Gin's actually pretty solid with Kido, but we know Byakuya is a master of Kido. And then Zanpakuto to Zanpakuto, Zenbone Zakura, again, could easily counter the slashing effect of something like Kamishina no Yari or just Shinso. Just simply because he has enough blades to block the solid cut. Just kind of like how he blocked Ichigo's attacks in their fight. That's kind of what I think what would happen here against Gin. Against Rose, it's actually much more of an easier beat because Rose, we assume Rose is pretty solid Aikido given the nature of his Zanpakuto, but Rose's blade is not really a good matchup for someone like Byakuya. Byakuya can honestly grab his blade as a whip with his Zanpakuto because the blades of Zenbone Zakura, as the cherry blossoms, can actually just suddenly grab onto something if he needs to. He can surround it and basically hold it in place. So it's actually not a good weapon to go up against Byakuya with. Byakuya is almost certainly faster. He's certainly better at swordsman overall. And if you even go Bankai to Bankai, Byakuya would just overwhelm the field and brush him with blades before he really gets any effect off of Kinshara Buchidan. So, yeah, I got to go Byakuya with that. Against Unohana, now I just went over Unohana in the last video, so you can get more of my thoughts on that. But I actually feel like Byakuya is one of the few captains who, because of actually the nature of his Zanpakuto, is well equipped to take on someone like Unohana. Now, in terms of sheer swordsmanship, she is probably the stronger swordsman. In fact, she's probably better at Kido too because of her Kaido, and she's probably equal to him or close enough to him in Shunpo. The thing is, though, that I think doesn't matter when you actually get down to the effects of his Bankai. His Bankai really is what kind of gives him the edge in this fight because, yes, she could try to overwhelm him, but his Bankai is able to just completely surround and keep him safe. Her acid for her Bankai also I don't think would be enough to get through his Zanpakuto, his Bankai, just because it doesn't appear to melt inorganic things. It only seems to melt flesh. And because of that, his Bankai is actually the perfect type of Bankai or Zanpakuto to keep hers at bay from killing him. So I actually, even though I think it would be a really tough fight, and if you're going by like a 1 out of 100 times, I do think there's definitely a level of, there's certainly a number of times where she takes the win. Ultimately, I think he would take more wins than she would. Then we go up against Shinji. A very similar problem here with, overwhelming. Is that because of Zenbon he can attack from all angles and all sides. So Shinji's Sakanade, as powerful as it is, and it's actually very powerful, ultimately doesn't play a big factor in this. Byakuya would just be like, okay, Bankai. Just wraps himself and just overwhelms him in a wave of blades and death. So, yes, Shinji unfortunately loses that fight, in my opinion. Sajin loses this fight against Byakuya because, frankly, his Bankai, as powerful as it is just that, pure power with no defense. And because they're so connected, whatever damage he or the giant takes, the other takes. And you get a giant mountain of blades, then you're going to completely be overwhelmed and taken over and just sliced to ribbons. Not to mention that Byakuya could easily just beat him with Kido alone. So, and that's unfortunate because it doesn't appear that Sajin has any real either interest, ability, or memory with Kido. Like maybe he's actually a Kido master and we never see that. Doesn't appear that way though. So yeah, ultimately I had to go Byakuya with that fight as well. So Byakuya's kind of been cleaning shop at the moment in this little contest. But then we get to someone who he can't beat in the fight. Shunsui, I do believe, would beat Byakuya in the fight. They are both, he's the oldest remaining captain. So right off the bat, he's got far more experience. When he was a captain, Byakuya was still a kid. So he's clearly has much more fighting experience, much more wisdom, and is far more conniving than Byakuya is. So right off the gate, he's got the edge in experience and wisdom. Then you factor in Shimpo. They're comparable to each other, certainly. Then you factor in swordsmanship. Now, I'd actually say they're on par with each other. I'd actually maybe even argue that Byakuya is probably a better swordsman when it comes to a one-on-one swords fight, like just using one single blade. But the thing is that Shunsui is ambidextrous with two different blades, and he is a master with those blades. And using two different blades, when you're a master, gives you a whole nother side of underhandedness and trickiness to deal with. So that evens out, and I think even maybe gives Shunsui the edge. Kido, knowledge of Kido, we know that Shunsui can use Hados at level 70, no problem. He's very likely he can use Hados and Bakugos much higher than that too. We just haven't seen it. So Byakuya is, even though we've seen him use higher level Kiyos, they're probably comparable to each other when it comes to knowledge of Kido. The fact that Shunsui is much older and wiser and probably had more time to learn more Kido and master them goes to show that he probably edges out Byakuya, but we've just seen Byakuya use more Kido than Shunsui more often. So you could probably level that as well. But you get then to their Zanpakuto. And when you're going to their Zanpakuto, Katenkyotsu is one of the most dangerous Zanpakuto in the series. All Byakuya does is create many cherry blossom blades. And they can be versatile, but creating children's games and turning them into reality and turning them into actual life or death games is a much deadlier ability, much different type of ability. Just going with Kageoni, where you can hide in shadow, step on a person's shadow, and stab them, basically. That alone would be something Byakuya has to watch out for, especially because when going into Bankai, his Bankai would create shadows, blotting out light and things like that. Then you talk about Iraoni, the color game, my personal favorite game. That would be something Byakuya would really have to struggle against. And because, again, that Shunsui wields two blades, he'd have to struggle against two blades from a master of them. Then you factor in all the other games, Taka-Oni, Bushogama. The other two ones, Doramaka, basically the red light, green light, and the shadow game, like the shadow duplicate game. And there's probably more techniques that Katenkyotsu has, because you just have to think of children's games, basically. But ultimately, Then you get into Bankai. Bankai to Bankai. Byakuya would get himself wrecked if he went against Bankai to Bankai. Are you kidding me? First done. Enemy shares your wounds, you share the wounds of the enemy. Byakuya, if it goes in and uses his Bankai or even Shikai or any sort of damaging Kido, he's just suddenly going to wind up hurt. Then the disease takes effect where you're bleeding profusely from these wounds that appear. The reason I think it wasn't as bad on Lily Barrow is because Lily Barrow was a being made of light at that point. You put it on someone who's an organic being, that's probably a lot more of a hindrance. The Dangai Abyss, where basically a giant thing, an ocean of water appears, and you either drown or run out of Ryatsu. And then the suicide, lover suicide, basically the razor wire that explodes your neck, basically. Yeah, I don't think there's anything really Byakuya can do against Shunsui overall. Shunsui is clearly, I think, just the more dangerous, more powerful opponent. Going up against the 9th Division, Kensei and Tozen. Very, very quickly, yeah, he would beat Kensei in a heartbeat. There's really no way that Kensei could stand it. Like, Kensei could punch Zenbon Sakura Kageyoshi away, sure, but there's only so many times he can do that, and Zenbon Sakura Kageyoshi would just come back. Meanwhile, Byakuya just, Riru Jukoro, and then just hits him with the 5-point lights, and then just keeps him in place. Tozen, similar problem to, like, Shinji, where even if Suzumushi and Makorogi is activated and Byakuya can't see, all he does is activate Bankai. He's surrounded in a safe zone and just boom, blasts Tozen back. So, yeah, unfortunately, they both lose pretty handily to Byakuya. Then you get into, where are you? There you are. Then you get into Toshiro. Now, Toshiro is one where you have to ask yourself the question, does the fight drag out long enough between the two of them that Toshiro makes it to his adult form where he can freeze all matter within the instance of 4 seconds? Honestly, when you're dealing with basically the remaining type of captains or Captain Class Shinigami we're dealing with, the answer is going to be no. Those characters are not going to give Toshiro that amount of time, that long of time to get to that level of power. The fight's just not going to drag on that long. And Byakuya is one of those individuals. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, does Toshiro, with all the abilities he overall has, is he capable of beating Byakuya? Honestly, no. Zenbon Sakura Kageyoshi and his Kido abilities alone are enough to completely overwhelm Toshiro, if I'm going to be honest. Toshiro, for all of his strength, is still very young, very inexperienced, very hot-headed, if we're going to be honest, because he can easily be riled up. And while his Hyorimaru is extremely powerful, he's one of those characters who always kind of gets the raw end of the deal in those fights. It's like, okay, sure, Hyorimaru is great. Guess what? Haribel can take it on, no problem. Hey, guess what? Luffy. Hey, guess what? Gin. Hey, guess what? Guess what? All these Sternwinners. Yeah, it's really not that powerful, guy. Despite being the strongest ice water type Zanpakuto and looking cool, it's Byakuya's sheer amount of, again, blades and Bankai. Kido alone would probably be able to take out Toshiro. So, and he's probably just as good, if not a better swordsman, and he's more certainly faster. From the speed feats we've seen them demonstrate, he is faster than Toshiro, definitely. Then we get into the final four, where we have Kenpachi Zaraki, and in this case, no, yeah, I don't. Here's the thing. I could have definitely seen the arguments early on in the series that Byakuya was still stronger than Kenpachi. I always preferred Kenpachi. He was a funner, cooler character. But, like, Soul Society arc, yeah, I could have still seen Byakuya being stronger than Kenpachi. Hueco Mundo arc, arguable, but I could have maybe seen it. Once we got to the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, it was clear. Kenpachi was the stronger of the two. Kenpachi lacks Kido. We do actually learn, by the way, Kenpachi has learned Shumpo. He's not like an expert at Shumpo, but he does have Shumpo now. And it's more that it's his raw ability with Shumpo. His natural speed and his raw speed at that point is just insane. Like, so, even so, we know his reflexes are good enough to match Byakuya. But his Ryatsu alone is enough that it could completely overwhelm most of what Byakuya would throw at him. As Aizen put it, Shinigami battles are battles of Ryatsu. And if my Ryatsu is greater than yours, then I can just cancel out your techniques. And that's how he basically survived the two-step kill from Suzume Bachi. And in essence, he could do that with probably a lot of the things that Byakuya would throw at him. He's also clearly a better swordsman, and just sheer power-wise would be able to blow through most of what Byakuya could throw at him. If he goes Zenbon Zakura, Kenpachi just goes Nozarashi. He doesn't even have to hit it with the blade. He can just hit it with the flat of the blade and like blow it back with a gust of wind. Think about that for a second. Technically speaking, Nozarashi could be technically, you can't see my quotation marks, but technically a wind-based Zanpakuto. Because if you just swing it like a fan, because it's so big you could do that, you could create a giant gust of wind, and there you go. It's not a wind-based Zanpakuto, obviously. But it is actually a cool little side feature of the blade when you think about it. But yeah, no, it's clear that Byakuya is just, he can't go up against Kenpachi anymore. He would lose a straight-out fight to Kenpachi. He would have, basically, to beat Kenpachi, you'd have to use so much binding Kido that he could not move. And even then, there's no guarantee, because if he takes his eye patch off, he might just blow that all away. So yeah, Kenpachi would very, very likely take the fight, in my mind, against Byakuya at this point, with what we got left. Mayuri would actually, I think, lose at this point to Byakuya. There are arguments to say that Mayuri is first off a lot stronger than I think we give him credit for, but that a lot of it comes from his prep. That's where a lot of Mayuri's strength comes from, is his ability to prepare for anything. Again, in the Camp Fear World Light Novel Volume 2, we get a lot of Mayuri because he's controlling his Stern Ritters and his Mayuri, or his Kurosochi's Corpse Squad. And there's a lot of prep that he's basically put in to deal with a lot of threats. Particularly when he meets Tsukishima, he actually says, do you want to assert yourself with my past? Go ahead. And Tsukishima's like, well, what about it? Tsukishima's like, there's no point. This guy's probably only existed for a couple minutes. There's no point in inserting myself into someone who doesn't pass. He made himself a meat puppet that he was controlling that looked exactly like him, that he was controlling from his lab. And basically, that's how he figured out how to get past Tsukishima's book at the end. When he has prep time, there's pretty much no one he can't beat. But the problem with that is when you don't give him prep time. And that's what we have to look at. There's no prep time for these interactions. There's just who would win in a straight-out fight without any prep. And the answer to that would clearly be Byakuya. He's a better swordsman, clearly. He's faster than Mayuri. His Kido knowledge, although Mayuri is said to be one of the most versed in Kido in the Soul Society, we very rarely had any proof of that, but apparently he is, according to Shunsui anyway. But Byakuya is probably just as capable of Kido as him. And then Zanpakuto to Zanpakuto. Again, Zenbon Zakura can keep Agisogi Jizo at bay. Bankai to Bankai. Again, the blades of Zenbon Zakura Kageyoshi can pretty much just keep all of Agisogi Jizo out of the way and then just eviscerate the Zanpakuto itself. And eviscerate Mayuri, who would then go into liquid form, but that still counts as a loss. So ultimately, I gotta go with Byakuya in that scenario. Mayuri, I do like Mayuri. Mayuri's pretty cool, but yeah. Then you gotta go, then we talk about Urahara. And Urahara is one who I'll admit, that's a little tricky when you figure out who they're going up against here. But Urahara definitely has things that Byakuya doesn't. First off, we know Urahara is a capable hand-to-hand fighter because he was in the 2nd Division. We also know that he's a master of Shunpo, again, because he was in the 2nd Division. So he probably matches Byakuya in Shunpo, or is at least almost as competent as Byakuya. And he's almost certainly a better hand-to-hand fighter. As a swordsman, that is really difficult to put down because Urahara is a very sporadic, on-the-fly, spontaneous individual. And because of the way Zanpakuto looks, or is in Shikai, it's actually a much better one-handed blade, or what's a better way to put that sentence? What's a better way to phrase that sentence? God, grammar. It happens when I rush my thoughts a little bit. My grammar suffers. But he's actually a more competent one-handed swordsman because of the way his Shikai, because his Shikai is kind of like it's not a long sword, it's not a katana. It's more designed kind of like a Chinese short sword. And because of that, it's actually a much more capable one-handed weapon. I love Benihime though. Benihime is one of my favorite Zanpakutos. And it's also more versatile than Zenbon Zakura is, because what Benihime pretty much does, because the Bankai restructures anything it touches, which, by the way, gives Urahara a massive advantage against Byakuya, because in theory, it could restructure the blades of Zenbon Zakura and then make them useless. Granted, that's a lot of restructuring he has to do, but given the fact that Urahara is clearly a master of Kido, using level 99, the highest level Kido you can use in the Can't Fear Your Own World Volume 2 novel, we've never seen Byakuya use something like that. But to be fair, he probably might. Okay, he might be able to, but we have no actual evidence he can. But Urahara can. We know that. And he used it without incantation. So, holy crap. The incantation makes it even stronger. But Urahara's Shikai alone is enough that basically, because his Bankai restructures anything it touches, it's likely what Urahara's Shikai does is restructure energy or spiritual pressure, and that's where all the effects of Benihime come. The attack, or sing, I can't remember what exactly it is called, but Sing Benihime, where the Blood Mist Shield, the negation technique he's on Yami, I can't remember that. The upward shot that he uses with the Benihime. In the movie, he uses one called Shred, which basically creates the shield and then creates like these shredding missiles of shredding little bullets of energy. Then there is, I can't remember the name of the tech. One of my favorite ones, the Keto Net basically creates, and then the giant F-off explosions. And I'm sure that's not everything we've seen Urahara capable of doing with his Benihime, because it's all a matter of the imagination. And when you're talking about imagination, Urahara is the smartest guy around. He is the smartest individual in all of Bleach. That's by Aizen's own admission. Aizen admitted he's smarter than him. And that's another factor we got to play into, is that Urahara is extremely cautious, planning 1,000 steps ahead with 1,000 different scenarios. He is prepared for just about anything. So I don't think, at least in terms of what Byakuya would have, that he'd have anything that would take Urahara by surprise. Now, when we get to the final 5, when we talk about Urahara, there is someone that I actually don't think he beats, but it's for very unique reasons. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But right now, Urahara takes the win over Byakuya. Finally, Rukia versus Byakuya. Although Rukia's Zanpakuto is dangerous and its Bankai could pose a problem, ultimately, I actually got to give the win to Byakuya. He's just overall more well-rounded. He would know to keep his distance. He's not dumb. And he is more versed in Kido than Rukia is. He's a better swordsman. And honestly, Zenbon Zakura Kageyoshi gives enough of a defensive wall against Hako Togami. I believe it's Hako Togami is her Bankai's name. I'm probably out by a little bit. His Bankai alone would give him enough defense to get away from that, or at least get out of the distance of it. And by the time he gets out of distance of it, then she can't move, and then he just takes her head off. So ultimately, Rukia would lose to Byakuya, I think. Ultimately, though, that is my thoughts on Byakuya as the 6th strongest Captain Class Shinigami. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe. As always, you want us to review something, put in the comments below. Let us know. We'll do a review of it at some point. And ideas for who would win, Star Wars, superhero, magic, what if, anything to do on the channel. Put that in the comments below. Let me know. I'll get to that at some point. So thanks for watching. I will see you folks next time. Hit that bell if you want notifications. And I'm just going to pre-record my who would win before I'm done for the day. So later.